Hey guys, what's up? It's Zola, and today we're going to be talking about part 3 of the filter series. And we're just going to be finishing the kind of filter series about anything I haven't touched on so far. So basically what lies in the last few menus. So what I'm going to do here is just quickly duplicate this layer, and we just have a photo today. We're going to get down to the sharpen. Now if, as you can see here, I'm at 33%. So to see this better, we're going to move into not quite 1000%, but 100%, which is what our image will look like at its largest before Photoshop starts duplicating pixels. So 100% is the best place to view this effect. So a sharpen basically tries to make an image sharper, obviously. What that means is it tries to make it more detailed. Now there's a few in here. If you have a camera where you've been shaking when you've taken the picture and you have a bit of motion blur in there, shake reduction is great, but otherwise you have a few options here. You have sharpen, sharpen edges, sharpen more, smart sharpen, and an unsharp mask. Now, to tell you the truth, I don't really use any of these. Any of the ones with a dot 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 will give you some options. So let's go to unsharp mask, and as you can see here, what it's going to do is just make the image a bit grainier. And as you go up, I'm going to really boost this just to show you exactly what it's doing. It's making the lights lighten, the darks darker, to give the impression of something being more sharp, basically. But if we turn the radius up here, we're going to see it starts doing horrible things to the image, to the point where it's distorting it, to the point where it's just horrible to look at. If you increase the threshold, it makes the effect less prominent in certain places, but as we can see here, it gives your image a certain look. But to be honest, I don't really like this look. It looks fake, and I prefer to keep my images natural. However, there is an option down, and I'm going to cover this now because because we're covering sharpens right now. I think it makes sense to cover this now. So what you want to do is make a duplicate of your layer. So if I hit Ctrl J there, or Command J on a Mac, if we go to filter and go to other and go to high pass, we're going to see this filter. Now if you've never used Photoshop too much, you'll be wondering what's going on here. And what this is it's creating an overlay mode where grey is basically 50%, and you'll see after I overlay this, but it's creating areas of highlights in the in these bright points here, and then it's creating darks as well in the darker points here. Now this might not seem like it makes a lot of sense, so what I'm going to do is crank it up a bit, and you'll kind of see what it's trying to do. It's trying to create almost a height map for certain areas of the image. So I'm going to keep this quite subtle at 2.5 and hit OK. Now this doesn't really work until you've gone up to here and you go to change this to overlay. Now if we have a look here, what we will see is, just to give you an example, if I create a new layer, and this is an effect I use a lot of the time. If you go to overlay and hit shift and backspace, and what we're going to do is fill this with 50% grey. Now what it will appear is that nothing has happened to this image, right? If I hide it and unhide it. If I change this, however, back to normal, you'll see that I have a layer filled with exactly 50% grey. If you change this to the overlay blend mode, nothing seems to happen, because overlay basically lightens the light areas and darkens the dark areas. But when we have things at an exactly neutral 50, then nothing happens. And what I can do now on this layer is use the dodge and the burn tool non-destructively. So I'm going to scale this up slightly to the point where we can see it, and I'm just going to brighten the areas of the model's face here. So I've brightened up here and here, and if I come into here and I use the burn tool, I can then darken the other areas. And again, if you've watched a video on on burn and dodge, then you'll know what I'm doing here. But if we have a look at this layer by hitting Alt here on the little eye, so what we're doing is we've got neutral grey, and we're burning like light and dark areas into this grey layer. And what this means is that when I bring it back, is we have a non-destructive layer of adding burns and dodges to our image. And when we create the high pass, we're doing exactly the same thing. So I'm going to come into 100% here and toggle this on and off, and you're going to see we go from having a kind of soft area to having certain areas which are just brought out, which are the light areas, and the dark areas are kind of darkened. And so this is giving our image an overall sharpening without giving us the harshness of something that one of the supposedly more specialized sharpen filters would give you. So that's my tip. If you ever want to add a sharpen to your image, do it with a non-sharp mask, because as you can see in the hair here, it's really doing a lot for adding a lot of sharpness and detail. It just gives your images that extra 10%. So a very useful filter there. So if we go back into here, there's not much down here I will use. However, I'm going to delete these two here and hit Control Shift E, Control Alt Shift E. I apologize for making a flattened layer from everything underneath it. So we have our new layer here, and there is one plugin I find actually quite useful, and that's the wind. If we use this, and what this does is, if I zoom out, is it creates a kind of glitch effect almost, which I find kind of cool. You can do it from the left or the right. You can do 3 different kinds of glitch. So you have the wind, you have the blast, which creates this more it's hard to describe, this more stacked effect almost. And the stagger is a lot shorter but a lot more pronounced, and the wind is like almost more on certain areas than others, and in this case in the lighter areas. If you look here, we see on the nose where the image is a lot lighter, it's happening a lot more, and the same here on the highlight on the left of the face. So, and you can change the angle from this, which this comes from. So here obviously now we're getting the effect going from the light areas but towards the left. So in other words, the wind is coming in from the right. So in this case I might hit that, and we might just do this stagger effect. And like I say, it adds a subtle amount of like glitch, which then you could, like, again with the blend modes and stuff, you can overlay and change how it kind of appears on the image. That doesn't look too great, but there's ways in which you can make this work. You can even like colorize this layer and just do that, and just add like subtle amounts of like glitch, so you can see how here we're starting to get this almost 3D effect. And then, like with all the effects that I encourage you to use, I encourage you to like paint a mask back in. So obviously I have a really horrible brush here, but if I was to choose a softer brush, then we could definitely dial this effect in certain areas and just have certain parts of the hair or something glitching, and whilst keeping everything else like uniform. So there's lots of creative possibilities for this. And remember, what you can always do with any of these effects is always go back up, and if you hit Control F, you can reapply the filter over and over again. So if I just hit Control F again and again, we're going to get this effect becoming more and more pronounced to the point where I might want to then change this and desaturate, and we can see now what it's starting to do if we bring this into the overlay blend mode. So there's lots of like uses for this particular filter, and I find it quite cool just for adding like a little layer of glitch, especially if you like colorize just this layer and then isolate it with a nice mask. Really useful. So I'm going to hide that effect for now, and I think that's pretty much it for the effects. There is one thing I'm going to show you now though, which is kind of hidden away if you don't know where it is. And we're going to come up here with our layer selected, and we're going to go to the filter gallery, which is up here. Now this is actually well hidden away because it's not in the actual menus, and what it is a list of lots of custom effects, which again are more or less useful. I don't use many of these, but some of these are actually quite useful. The grain one I use sometimes. Mosaic one I can almost definitely say I've never used. We have the patchwork, the stained glass, the none of those are particularly useful. Glowing edges not so much, but some of these are actually quite interesting, and maybe not so much as one layer, but if you think about how can I then blend this with the existing layers, then that's when you start to get some cool effects. And the other thing I'd like to point out with a lot of these is a lot of them are actually quite crappy when you first use them, but if you come up to here and you start like customizing the distortion, and this one in particular has like different amounts of things, so this is like you're almost looking at the picture through frosted glass, and this is actually can be a really useful effect. So here you have the different textures, you have like the canvas, so you're looking out through a canvas, or blocks. Blocks is almost like one of those windows which has like cubes, and actually this would be a really difficult effect to recreate, so I actually have used this effect a couple of times, and obviously you can change the scaling of the cubes and stuff, and the way that affects the picture. If we decrease the distortion, we can bring it like right down to the point where it doesn't happen, and then maybe just up it to 1, and you can start to see these subtle bits of distortion all the way to, you know, something like this, which would be like if you're looking in through a proper window. So lots of creative possibilities for these. I encourage you to go and play with these. Like I say, a lot of them aren't great, and a lot of them might not seem great at the start, but if you start to actually dig into, like Cutout is one of these that I actually have used a couple of times. So if we come out and we go to Cutout, and hopefully this doesn't crash. Here we have dry brush. Let's try Cutout. Bring the levels down and the simplicity up, and we're going to compute eventually. There we go. So the edge simplicity basically makes the image a lot easier to read in this case, but if you increase the levels, you then start to bring some of that detail back, and you can create some super stylized looks, which you know, can be a good basis again for, so say I was just to okay this, we're going to apply it, and you know, you can then play with overlaying this and getting some kind of cartoony looks. So again, there we go. So the Cutout gallery is one which maybe a soft light might be better for this, is one which can add, you know, little subtle effects which might not seem great on their own when they're in the gallery, but if you combine it with the blend modes and the pictures you have in there already, and if I hit, you know, and again if you hit Control F again, you're going to apply this effect one more time. So there's infinite possibilities literally, so I encourage you to go in and play with them and see what you come up with. But yeah, that's been my guide to the filters. I don't use many of them, as you've seen, but I think some of them are definitely worth mentioning. So I hope you've learnt something from this section, and I'm not quite sure what we'll be doing next, but yeah, hopefully see you for that lesson, and thanks for watching.